And Roland is going to come and share this morning's reading, and then Rick is going to preach.
The reading is a selection of verses from Proverbs 24. By wisdom a house is built, and by understanding it is established. By knowledge the rooms are filled with all precious and pleasant riches. Wise warriors are mightier than strong ones, and those who have knowledge than those who have strength. For by wise guidance you can wage your war, and in abundance of counselors there is victory. Wisdom is too high for fools. In the gate they do not open their mouths. Know that wisdom is like honey to your soul. If you find it, you will find a future, and your hope will not be cut off. One who gives an honest answer gives a kiss on the lips. Prepare your work outside. Get everything ready for you in the field, and after that, build your house. Do not be a witness against your neighbor without cause, and do not deceive with your lips. Do not say, I will do to others as they have done to me. I will pay them back for what they have done. I passed by the field of one who was lazy, by the vineyard of a stupid person, and see, it was all overgrown with thorns. The ground was covered with nettles, and its stone wall was broken down. Then I saw and considered it. I looked and received instruction. A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and poverty will come upon you like a robber, and want like an armed warrior.
Thank you very much, Roland. Good morning, everybody. Well, Charlie's away, Andy's away. It's the longest day. It's summer. I thought we'd do something different. And it's very unusual at Bessels Green to be given no subject to preach from. And it's a problem, because you can spend as much time thinking, what passage should I preach from, as actually preparing your sermon. And I have been coming to this church for 34 years. I know you're thinking, you've suffered long enough, Rick. And I've never heard a sermon on the book of Proverbs. Today, I'm going to put that right. And I checked my notes to see when I had last spoken from the book of Proverbs, and the answer was 24 years ago on a mission trip I made to Kenya, speaking to a group of evangelists, actually. So we're going to look at the book of Proverbs. I'll introduce the book to you, give you a bit of background, and then we'll dig into Proverbs 24, which has got some great advice for all of us. It's a strange book of Proverbs, 900 sayings, and not all of them scriptural. And actually, Proverbs really describes life as it is. It's not very churchy. It's very much the language of the school, of the shop, of the place of work, of the office, outside the church. And it's full of characters that you would instantly recognize. The nagging wife, the woman who talks too much, the youth who hangs around street corners, the neighbour who pops in for a minute and stays for hours, and worse than that, the person who is unbearably cheerful in the morning. We all know these people, and they fill the book of Proverbs. And it's a chaotic book, I have to say. I've read several commentaries on Proverbs as they try to bring some logic to it. There's no logic to it. It's just a collection of sayings. It's disorganized, it's frustrating. We know that the first 9 chapters were written by Solomon. They are his wise words, mainly for his sons and for other young leaders. But the rest is a hodgepodge. There's some Jewish proverbs, there are some Arabic proverbs. People speculate they may have come from some of Solomon's wives, who of course were daughters of the Pharaoh from Egypt. And then, would you believe, 250 years later, Hezekiah, King Hezekiah, adds his own set of proverbs. So although Solomon died in 931 BC, this book wasn't finished until 550 BC. But Many of these proverbs are familiar. We use them in everyday life. Pride comes before a fall. We often say that. Here's some advice for 21st century parents. Spare the rod and spoil the child. That goes down well, I'm sure, amongst the youth of today. Iron sharpens iron, as a friend sharpens a friend. I've often said that when I've worked in high-performing teams at work. Laughter is the best medicine. Those of you old enough to remember the Reader's Digest will remember there was a page called Laughter is the Best Medicine. I thought it was from there. It's not. It's from the book of Proverbs. And this is one of my favourites. Even fools are thought wise if they keep silent. A friend of mine once said, you know, Rick, it's far better to be thought a fool than open your mouth and remove all doubt. And Proverbs is funny as well. I don't want to say too much about the nagging wives, but the proverb does say, it is better to live alone in the corner of an attic than with a nagging wife in a beautiful house. And how about this one? Rumours are tasty morsels. They sink deep into a person's heart. You know, we live in a world of social media and misinformation, led sometimes, I think, by Donald Trump. How true that is, that things that aren't true run far faster than facts. But Proverbs can also be a profound book as well. Righteousness exalts a nation, says the proverb. Sin as a reproach to any people. I'll have more to say about that later on. An honest answer is a sign of true friendship. Only the fool says in his heart, there is no God. And we live in a world where there are many foolish people. Actually, it's quite interesting because the only person in the New Testament that Jesus calls a fool, you may remember, is Luke chapter 12. It's the rich young ruler, the man who says, I have had a fantastic crop of wheat. Do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to build and build barns. I'm going to store all the wheat, and that'll be it. I'll put up my feet, and I'll just enjoy life. And Jesus says, you fool, what you don't know is you're going to die tonight. What will happen to it all then? We know that the book of Proverbs was largely written by Solomon. Supposedly, according to 1 Kings 3, the wisest man on earth. Folks, he had 700 wives and 700 mothers-in-law. In addition, he had 300 concubines. I'm not really sure quite how wise he was, actually. He wrote 3 books in our Bible. An erotic love poem, which we've also never heard a sermon about, Song of Songs. He was so infatuated with his fiancée that he doesn't even mention God in that book. He wrote Proverbs, as we've said, advice to young leaders and to sons. He wrote it in his middle age. And finally, he wrote the very enigmatic book of Ecclesiastes at the end of his life. Disillusioned, disappointed, fed up. He looked at all the things he'd done, all the great projects he'd run, and he said, you know what? It's meaningless. It's pointless. The only lasting purpose in life, he says, is through God. How wise is that? Well, talking of wisdom, that is the key theme of the book of Proverbs, as you heard read by Roland and also by Jessica when she started. Wisdom is not the same as intelligence. There are many intelligent people in this world who are not very wise at all. We are called to be wise, to be astute, to be discerning, to be godly. And, the world sees us as killjoys, that, we've just got heaven in our minds and nothing else. But we know that true wisdom comes from knowing the Word of God. And we live in a nation, and can I say, after Friday's vote in the House of Commons, we live very much in a nation where we will need great wisdom to see this massive societal change with assisted dying. How will that work out in practice? How will that be implemented? Great wisdom will be needed by people to implement that in a way that secures our livelihoods. Just a warning. Proverbs aren't promises. They're general statements of truth. They're not promises to be claimed. Now, there'll be many people who have set up a business and believed that if they commit to the Lord, whatever they do, their plans will succeed. And there's nothing wrong with that, prayerfully to do that. But it's not a promise. Some of those businesses and enterprises and projects will have failed. Or how about one that we can identify with, especially if we're parents? Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. Sadly, some of our children have departed from it. And it wasn't our fault, because it wasn't a promise. It was just a wise saying. It's a general truth, and a good one, but not a promise to be claimed. Well, if you're beginning to fall asleep now, I hope not, that is the longest introduction I've ever done to a book. Now we're going to get stuck into Proverbs 24 and just say 4 things. And if you were going to nod off, just do it after this slide, because you'll get most of the sermon just by looking at it. This section, Proverbs 24, is about building a house, how you need to get firm foundations, how you need to lay out your tools and then build a house. It's equally applicable for life building too, for those of us who want firm foundations in our lives. And Solomon says 4 things. 2 things to take and 2 things to be. You can see them on the screen. Let's have a look at them in detail. Firstly, says Solomon, we should take time. By wisdom, a house is built. Prepare your work. Get everything ready, he says in verse 27. You know, rushing is never a good idea. Those of us who have the pleasure of driving on the M25 will get many experiences of people who really seem to feel that life has to be rushed constantly. Some of the worst driving I've seen, dangerous driving, is on that motorway. And as people carve me up and zoom in and out of lanes, I say to myself another proverb, not a biblical one, a Spanish one, and it says this: those who rush the most reach the grave first. I often think that. And you know, when you rush, you make mistakes. And when you rush, you regret some things that you said or did. So Solomon says, take the long view. Prepare carefully. Think it through. You know, it's very interesting that when Nehemiah rebuilt the walls of Jerusalem, you know, he returned, he saw the walls were in rubble, he knew he'd have a huge project to build them. The first thing he did is he took just a couple of friends, if you look carefully, and he spent a whole night walking the walls, or maybe riding the walls, just to get a measure of the job. That's, I found, quite inspirational, that we too should think carefully before we leap into action. Bev's dad was a carpenter. He was a good carpenter. He always said to me, measure twice, cut once. Advice I should have taken more frequently. And you know, that's not my skill set, but I train people in how to facilitate meetings, complex, difficult meetings, often international meetings, sometimes virtual meetings. And I always say the same to them. I say, prepare carefully. Think about the time. Think about the people who are coming and their particular views. Think about your agenda and how you'll order items. The more you plan, the more likely the meeting is to be successful. You know, it's true, whether you're preparing a sermon or writing a document or about to send a big email, just sleep on it. It's good advice. You'll inevitably make slight changes in the morning. Something else I did, I worked with organizations helping them to implement change more effectively. Big changes sometimes, smaller changes sometimes. How can we make this happen? How can we implement this change in a way that people accept it and run with it and feel aligned to it? I wish that happened in more organizations. It was called the change acceleration process. And one of the mottos of that training course was go slow in order to go fast. Good advice. And talking of advice, the second thing is that we should listen to others. In abundance of counselors, there is victory, says Solomon. So if I may misquote a previous rector of Sevenoaks Parish Church, not other than John Donne, who said no man is an island. Can I say no manager is an island? You know, the tabloid press would have us believe that organisations are led by single dynamic individuals who should be praised when the results are good and sacked when they're bad. Everybody who works in business knows that's far from the truth. We all work in teams, and I'm a great believer in the wisdom of teams, of the diversity of thinking that comes when you get a group of people together. It's not about the lone individual. We all need to take advice and counsel. I'm a fairly opinionated person, if I'm honest, and like some others in this congregation, I think my view is probably the right one and the best one. But I have learned to be humble and to listen. When I worked in America, I had a very able deputy called Dave Rogers. Let me honour you, Dave, in this sermon. And he would sometimes take me on one side and say, "You did come over a bit strong, Rick," or "I'm not sure what you said was entirely clear." His counsel was invaluable, and I got even better as time went on. I learned to ask Dave about things before I said them, rather than afterwards. Who do you need to seek counsel from? What decision, what action, what project, what are you about to do or plan to do, where actually a word of advice might be useful? Who could you talk to about it, rather than just going it alone? The third thing that Solomon says is that we should be straight. An honest answer, he says, I love this, is like a kiss on the lips. You know, honest feedback, and some of you may give me some honest feedback after this sermon, is a gift to be valued. Now, my good colleague Rob, who's sitting there, has got a little secret plot that he's going to put into practice in about 2 months' time. He will be doing an appraisal of Charlie and Andy. And that's a job I've done on 2 occasions. And some of you will know, and you'll know again, that you'll be asked to give your honest feedback. Can I say, as somebody who's done this before, your feedback has been incredible. Your insights have been valuable, astute, thoughtful. And I can also tell you that our ministers, Charlie and Andy, take what you say incredibly seriously, reflect on it very thoughtfully. So please give honest, straight feedback to Rob when, in a couple of months' time, he asks you for it. But there's a broader context to this as well, because not being straight, not being honest, destroys a nation. Corruption destroys nations. Now, some of you may be familiar with Transparency International. If you have a spare moment, Google it and look at their website. They're an organisation that ranks the 180 countries in the world based on their level of corruption. And it won't surprise you who's at the bottom of the list. Sudan, North Korea, Syria, Venezuela. Economically, these are the basket cases of the world. These are the places where you can't get anything done without a backhander, without a bribe, where you can't trust government officials because they'll take the money for themselves rather than anything else. No wonder their people live in desperate poverty. Britain, of course, is at the other end of the spectrum. We're towards the top of the Transparency International rankings. But actually, watch out, UK, we're 21st from the top. We're beaten by Norway, New Zealand, Germany, Denmark. Corruption is something that can creep into public and private life. And, as the proverb says, sin is a reproach to any people. But let's take it back to a personal level. How can we be straight? Well, in the simplest way, let your yes be yes. Say what you mean and mean what you say. I am critical, perhaps especially of Christians, who say they're going to do something and then don't do it. I guard myself, but I'm sure I've made the mistake of saying I'll pray for you and then forgetting. Let us be people of our words. Let our words have gravitas and seriousness. Let our words be true. and straight. Well, finally, always a good moment when a preacher says finally, unless he's the Apostle Paul, which means he's got 3 more chapters yet to write. But in my case, I've only got 1 more point to make, and it's to be hardworking. A little sleep, a little slumber, and poverty will come like a robber, says the Proverbs. Incidentally, I can see my papers blowing away here. We'll be in the book of Ecclesiastes if it carries on blowing. My dad always said that genius was 99% perspiration and only 1% inspiration. I'm not sure if that's quite true, because I do think there's a case for genius. But I know what he means. There are no quick fixes. I mean, I love to watch these YouTube videos of young people, riding bikes down mountains, or guys jumping off high diving boards. Maybe it shows maybe that's what the algorithms give me, I don't know. And I think this is fantastic, but it's not fantastic because it tempts you to think, I could do that. No, you couldn't. Without lots and lots of hard work, lots and lots of failures. There aren't any quick fixes. There's no other secret to success against hard work. Now, as I say that, I think there's another sermon here, folks, which I'm not going to preach today, which is for some of us who work too hard and too long. Sue Linton alluded to this when she struggled about the difficulty of talking to some of the folk in their 30s and 40s in this church who have very seriously responsible jobs and are just weighed down with responsibility. And for you folks, there's a sermon I'd like to preach about time management and boundaries, but not this morning. We are called to be hardworking. And in church life, nothing's achieved without hard work. The fabric of this building stays together and looks neat because of hard work. These lovely flowers, these peonies, somebody's put some hard work into them. The preparation of the service, the practice of the music, the quiet pastoral work that goes on, the gardening, the preparation of youth work and youth events that's going on now in other parts of this church. And in our personal life, the caring for those we love, maybe elderly parents or children, it's hard work. I don't want to make it sound unattractive, because I hope we do this with a cheerful heart. Whenever I set out to do a job and think, this is a bit of a gutty job, I have in mind Colossians 3:23, one of my favourite texts. Whatever you do, put your whole heart into it, as if you were doing it for the Lord. So it doesn't matter if I'm creosoting a fence or digging out weeds, I try and put my whole heart into it. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Rick, this is just sanctified common sense. And some of it's not that sanctified. And this is what my dad told me. I don't need to hear it in a sermon. And it's an interesting point, because the book of Proverbs is referred to 14 times in the New Testament. Peter and Paul specifically refer to Proverbs. Jesus is a bit more oblique. He refers to Proverbs, but not directly. I mean, one example is in Luke 14, when he talks about the person who goes to a banquet and sits at the high seat, only to be really embarrassed when the host moves him down to a lower seat. He takes that directly from the proverb that says, don't exalt yourself before the king. And there are other examples as well. A familiar one, Jesus talks about building your house not on the sand, but on the rocks. You're all familiar with that Sunday school story, really. I remember hearing it then. He takes that from another proverb, and indeed from these verses, about giving firm foundations. And if you want a New Testament version of Proverbs, look no further than the book of James. Equally chaotic, incidentally, equally disorganized. I struggle with its logic, but packed full of practical advice. We, as Christians, need to get wise, not only for ourselves and those who are around us, but because our wisdom glorifies God, and as such, reflects him too. So, at the same time that most of our young people have finished all their examinations, finished all their homework, it's time for the adults to get some homework too. And here it is. In the weeks that lie ahead, would you take to heart these 4 guidelines from the book of Proverbs? There's not a single person here who won't be thinking, I mustn't rush this. I wonder if it would be good to talk to somebody about this. I'm not sure I've been entirely open in this situation. Perhaps I need to be. This is a lousy job. I'd hope to shortcut it, but I'm going to do it properly, because if it's worth doing well. Take your homework with a light and cheerful heart. And join me now as we pray. Lord Jesus, we thank you for this book. It's a strange and funny book in many ways, but it's got wisdom for us. And Paul says that our wisdom is in knowing you. So in the weeks that lie ahead, help us to take to heart these directions from you to lead wise, healthy, wealthy, and honourable lives. Amen.